Welcome back to MFO, everybody. Thanks for tuning in. Today, we're going to talk about the first stage of the BPT that was down in Texas on Lake Conroe. New format, only one period were they allowed to use forward-facing sonar. It was intended to kind of get back to more traditional fishing methods, increase the viewership, make it a little bit more competitive, make it a little more viewer friendly for guys who wanted to watch real bass fishing, and maybe add to the excitement a little bit. Well, did it do that? We're going to talk about it when we come back. Welcome back to Mark Fisher Outdoors, everybody. I'm Mark Fisher. Hey, I tried to watch as much as I could of the first stage of the BPT that was down on Lake Conroe over the weekend. And I got to tell you, in the beginning, it turned me off because when they had all 66 anglers fishing, it was pretty much undiscernible that forward-facing sonar was only allowed in one period. And again, if you're not clear on it, they only allow forward-facing sonar during one period, but the angler gets to choose which period they use forward-facing sonar. So the reality is, if you have 66 guys, 20 of them could choose to use it first period, 20 of them could choose to use it second period, and 26 could choose to use it third period, which meant then that the guys that were typically catching more fish were the guys that were using forward-facing sonar, which meant that the cameras were typically with the guys that were using forward-facing sonar, not completely, but quite a bit. And so it looked like, and again, to me, I wasn't watching all of it, but it looked like any other tournament where, yep, guys are looking at their screen and they're catching fish. That was in the beginning when they had the full field for the first couple of days. As they whittled down, then it got to the point where, okay, we're seeing a lot more guys doing traditional things like throwing lipless crankbaits and chatterbaits. And the interesting thing was that in the final day, when they only had 10 anglers, 8 out of the 10 anglers chose to use the first period of the day as their forward-facing period, which meant that, yep, there were a lot of guys in that first period on Sunday that were using forward-facing and trying to get their weights up in that first period. Only 2 guys, Justin Lucas and Alton Jones, chose not to use forward-facing in that first period. And they were down in 9th and 10th while everybody else was using forward-facing and getting the weights up. The interesting thing about it was that it reminded me of a NASCAR race, which it got more exciting as the race went on. Because now, after the first period, you had them kind of stacked up in terms of where their major weights were going to come from that first period. But then there was a lot of jockeying for position. And I didn't say this, but congratulations to Justin Cooper, who ended up winning. But boy, I tell you, from a finish standpoint, and again, just like NASCAR, you watch the whole race and you get to the final, couple of laps, and that's when all the moves happen. And this happened in just the same way. Colby Miller actually took the lead with 45 seconds left to go in competition, and Justin turns around and catches one last fish using a lipless crankbait and ends up taking the win by just over 1 pound over Colby Miller. I mean, a really, really exciting finish, and using traditional methods, because they weren't, at that point, forward-facing sonar wasn't an option for them in the second and the third periods for those anglers. So let's look at this for a little bit, because I've actually heard some other YouTubers talking about this new format. First of all, these guys can catch fish. And to say, hey, most of the weight was caught during the forward-facing sonar periods, yeah, forward-facing sonar absolutely helps you catch more quantity of fish. And in the format that the BPT uses, where everything counts, it's going to increase the weights. But it doesn't mean that these guys can't catch fish when they're not using it. They were absolutely catching fish in the other periods, and they were catching fish equally, sharing the lead back and forth, making runs on the leader and things like that. And quite honestly, if you look at the stats, most of the bigger fish that were caught using traditional fishing methods, not shaking a minnow. Drew Gill ended up catching an 8-pounder, I think the tournament's biggest fish, and that was when he was not using forward-facing sonar. Several of the large fish were caught throwing a lipless crankbait, throwing a chatterbait, even some speed worms and things like that. Typical Texas shallow grass kinds of things. And again, putting those strategies in, whether that strategy of going forward facing in the morning probably had to do more with temperatures were a little colder in the morning. As the sun came up, the water temperatures started to rise, fish started to move shallower to the grass, which probably made sense and worked to those guys' benefit, where there were more fish being able to be caught shallow over the grass than out where they were catching them on the deeper forward-facing sonar stuff. So was it exciting? You can't argue with the fact that the ending was exciting. Lead changes within 45 seconds of the end of the tournament, 100%. Were there big fish caught? Absolutely. And big fish caught using traditional fishing methods. Was there a lot of forward facing? Yeah, especially when the full field was there. When the full field was there, it didn't look anything different than last year because the cameras were primarily on the guys that were forward facing. And again, I'm telling you, that was my perspective. I didn't watch 8 hours a day of the tournament, but every time I tuned in, I was watching guys using forward facing in the beginning couple of days. So that's my opinion on this, guys. I am going to keep watching to kind of see how things go. We have to be aware of the fact that the fishery is going to have an impact on how things go. If it's a fishery where forward-facing sonar dominates, and a lot of them do, then there's going to be a period when an angler can jump ahead using it. But it certainly shows that these guys do know how to catch fish when they aren't glued to a screen. I'd love to hear what your comments are, guys. I'm trying to not be a homer here and just stick up for MLF. This video would have gone a lot different had it been similar to the first day, 2 days that I was watching it. But as I watched it through to the conclusion, it kind of changed my opinion. So I'm curious as to what your opinions are, guys. I'd love to hear from you. Send me your comments in the comments section, and we will see you tomorrow for another episode. Mark Fisher Outdoors. Take care, everybody.